So welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a brand new game from GMT.
Yep.
Caesar, Rome vs. Gaul. And this is designed by Mark Simonich. And this is a sequel? Call it a sequel? Or part of the series?
Sure, yeah. That's probably a better
Sure.
apt description.
Very reminiscent of his Hannibal, which is Rome vs. Carthage. This is a two-player card-driven game. Uses point-to-point movement. It's about influencing and controlling areas, and you also have stacks of armies marching around the board trying to change control of those areas. The game, so it just came out. The game is, it says that it's about 2 to 3 hours on the box.
I think that's underestimating, but
it's definitely closer to 3.
Yep.
It might be a bit more than that. Your first play or two, whilst you
you gotta know the
learn
cards
the rules and go over that. But I think once you get down to it, some of the later turns were, playing a card, putting a couple tokens out, playing a card, moving a guy. Some of the turns get a little bit long if you've got lots of action points and some bonus actions, and you're moving stacks of military units around, doing lots of combats. Some cards take much longer than others. Mm-hmm. But it's a two-player game. I don't think you can play like homebrew solo modes, but it doesn't come with a solo mode or anything like that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you could play this just two-fisted, right?
You could, and that's fine, but
just have a short memory. And
when it's CDGs,
it's hard.
It's not for me. That's not how I play these games.
You could probably use Stuka Joe's CDG method.
And that's already up on BGG. There's a little how to do that.
Yep.
If you're that inclined to do this and you don't have an opponent at this time.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, this is a game that depicts northwestern Europe. So it's basically the whole of Gaul. And then you got a tiny part of the Roman Empire down there, and it's basically Caesar has to go out and conquer Gaul. Mm-hmm. That's the point of this game, and it's a game where the Romans have to go and accrue 12 victory points, otherwise they lose the game.
Yeah.
So it's on them to go and be proactive, and the Gallic player is just there trying to stop them from doing that. Mm-hmm. It is the Gallic player also has some auto victory conditions. Very difficult to achieve those as well, as are the Roman auto victory conditions. If you get to that point, the game's been very, very lopsided. Mm. But that's what this game is.
Yeah, I'm just going to say one comment. For the Romans to win their auto victory condition, I think the other player would have to be asleep.
Yeah,
and just not playing cards.
It would be
impossible.
And frankly, the same thing for the Gallic victory conditions.
Yeah,
if they would just get totally dominated,
just don't see that
have to go and conquer Rome basically, and just
I don't ever see that happening.
This is a game that's going to be won typically by the game end victory conditions.
Yeah, going full 6 turns and seeing who has.
And it is only 6 turns.
Yeah,
you have 8 cards each per turn.
Yep.
So it's not, in that sense, we've played games where it's, have 7 cards a turn and you go for 9 rounds and they take forever. This one is fewer cards.
Yeah.
The cards that you have they have events and action points on them, just like every other CDG does. Mm-hmm. You'll have 0 to 3 action points on there. And they're associated with either side, the Romans or the Gauls.
Yeah.
But the events don't trigger for the opponent like they do in other games.
It's just if you aren't the Romans and you have a Roman card, you can't use the event.
Yes.
You would just, as the Gauls, use the 1 to 3 action points.
Which helps keep the game going at a decent clip, because you don't have that initial, let me sit down for 10 minutes and analyze how I'm not going to get screwed.
Yep.
You can be like, okay, these I've got some cool events I need to look through. The rest of them, it's just numbers.
Yep.
Which is nice, that you don't have that extra layer of being a burden and taking ages of analysis as well. Combat is done quite simply. You have a value of your combat value. I have a combat value. There's 2 modifiers, and you roll 2d6 each, and then you compare the results. It's not a ratioed CRT
no
like
CRT,
a lot of games.
Yep.
And then basically whoever did the most losses to the opponent wins. It's
yep.
real simple. There's a little extra mechanic in there for how you can do some re-rolls of a die, not your dice. You can say,
a single die.
Yeah.
I can keep the 6. You want to re-roll.
Or I'm going to... You re-roll your 6.
You re-roll your 6, yeah.
So you roll your dice and you'll have anywhere from like 1 to 2, sometimes 3 re-rolls, and you go through that, and then at the end you assign losses, who won, who lost.
Yeah.
It's very simple in that way. Not the crunchiest of games from like that tactical historical combat standpoint. This is a game about moving across a map, trying to spread your influence, trying to remove opposition influence, and gain control of regions.
And one other thing about combat, the Romans, the legions, are so well trained that any roll of a 1 and 2 equates to a 3.
Yes.
So the worst you can ever do on 2d6 is a roll of 6.
Yes.
So you take that into account, and as the Romans, it gives you a little more liberty to be a little more
confidence.
Aggressive.
Yep. Which they need. They have to be in this game.
The leaders are a little better too, and you're going to get a couple more re-rolls.
Yes.
But I think that also lulls you into believing it's about something that it's not.
Yeah.
This game will not be won by the Romans by force of arms. It's really not what it's about.
No.
It's about attacking here and there to get some victory points and also minimize your ability to mess with those victory points.
Yes.
But it's not really about going out and I'm going to attack and attack and attack. If you do that, you're going to lose as the Romans. Period.
Yeah, the Roman military is there to support the Roman influence and governance.
Yeah.
That's
protect and kind of advance it, because you can move into blank spaces.
Yes.
And pick up an influence.
And they're there to kind of move the borders and then protect them.
Yes.
This game is not about moving and fighting necessarily.
No.
It's about influencing areas. Combat can help you do that sometimes and can help remove enemy stuff, but the first few rounds of the game, you're just trying to flood the map with as much of your influence as you can, and then you kind of are progressing from there. How do I expand my empire? How do I crush yours? And then you start getting into some of the more tactical aspects of the combat, but this is a game of putting your influence out on the board.
Yeah.
That's the crux of it.
I would say that is absolutely true, but I do believe you at least have to do a little bit of combat.
Oh, and yes, you will definitely need to, absolutely.
Because as you were the Gaelic tribes, every turn you're drawing 2 or 3 of them, right, to come out onto the map.
Yeah, you draw 3 Gallic reinforcements.
And if the Romans aren't kind of picking 1 or 2 of those off, man, all of a sudden it can be very easy to see a stack of 7 or 8 combat power. And they're going to be...
Or if they haven't consolidated the lands behind them, they can start popping up behind them in some of the later stages of the game. Also, but very bad.
Yeah.
But if you can dominate the whole regions, then these the reinforcements, the uprisings don't necessarily happen in the same way. They might have to go into the submitted tribes where they're a bit weaker.
Yeah.
Or you have to stick them in a war tribe and a war council, and then I've got to go and try and free them, and then they can come out on the board.
But I wanted to make sure that's very clear. This is not necessarily a traditional war game. It's not about combat. It's not about sieging all day long. Those things are going to tie you up and take your actions that could be spent putting out influence and combating you putting out influence.
Yes.
That's what the game ultimately is about. The game never asks you, how many Gaelic tribes did you kill this turn? Well, that doesn't really matter.
No.
How many influence points did I put down on the map?
Yes.
So you kept saying this compares very similarly to Washington's War.
Yes. I get a lot of the same vibes from that, especially because when we played that, I was like, oh, it's a war game.
We fought it out,
game. We spent so long fighting.
And then we were like,
and then the last 2 hands of cards, you're like, oh.
I shouldn't have been fighting.
This is a game of victory points.
Yeah.
Let me spread all my influence and try and remove yours. That's what this game is about. You want to make the board blue, and then I'm using my armies to
keep it blue.
Make the red spaces blue and to keep my blue spaces blue. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And if you take a step back from that and start just, I want to wipe you from the board.
Yes.
Probably going to lose the game that way.
Well, you can't. One of the automatic victory conditions is to remove all the Gaelic fortified towns. That's pretty hard.
If you're going to do it, it's going to be because you have to do that and you have to control.
Yeah, it's
it's insane.
But that's very hard to do. So I think what we're trying to say here is don't think this is a traditional war game.
Yeah.
That you're going to come out here and you're going to fight every round and every turn, every card. No, if you do that, you're going to lose. I mean, period.
Yeah.
Your complaint to me, or not complaint to me, but your observation was, hey, Grant, you fought too many battles that first round.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I futzed around with a couple of your strongholds down there because I didn't want you to have a base to jump off with your influence points.
And there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
But early game, I think you want to spread out as much as possible.
You want to blitz to the north and try to get your influence as far as you can.
Yeah.
Because it's so much easier to put in an influence point in a blank area.
Yes, very, very much easier. You can just place it in a blank area.
When I have to remove yours, it takes 2 of my movement points from my army.
Yeah, first off, you have to have an army there,
yeah,
right?
Which
you got to move an army there, and 2 of the movement points have to
put
be
down the
spent
rebellion.
Yep. Then you got to spend an action point to put one army.
Yeah,
it's just
it just takes a long. That's why late in the game you kind of had this. We'll call it a blue wall. You had this blue double depth line of influence markers, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, there's just no way.
Yeah,
there's just no way for me to overcome that. And unfortunately, I let that happen. I probably should have done some things to avoid that, but don't let those things happen to you. Those are things that you're going to regret.
Lessons learned.
Lessons learned.
One, that's for sure.
A second play of this will be very different than our first play,
and would be much quicker as well.
I agree.
Yeah, the first couple of turns, it's like, okay, how do you do this? How do you do that? Once you learn it, this is not a complicated game. I would say.
No.
The play aids are decent. I wish there was some bits and pieces on there that aren't.
Yeah. There's a lot of rules that are absent, particularly in some of the combat.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure why it didn't have.
It's got a really nice
elements.
sequence of play. It's got a nice action menu and your movement point costs and bits and pieces. But yeah, for the combat, there's a couple bits and pieces I just wish were on there.
I can't even recall exactly what they were, but
just some modifiers and the dice re-roll bits and pieces. Just stick them on.
Yeah, just put it on there. Yeah, as a note,
because there's space for it.
Yeah,
they could have done it. But generally speaking, it was fairly easy to learn and play this game.
Yeah,
I would agree. There is also a good example of play in the back of the rulebook. The rulebook was not big either. I think rules were
20 pages, something like that.
Really, 19 pages of actual rules. It's not bad. The cards are really big.
Yeah, they are.
These are.
Ironically, they're so big that they had to provide special.
Custom
card covers because. I don't know. We're war gamers. I'm not sure we really care that our cards are
I personally don't. But you get a bunch of sleeves in here, which is nice.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, but they really had to put the sleeves in because they gave us these odd-shaped cards.
Yeah, they weren't the standard playing cards.
Because they didn't want those neurotic people that are going to be like, well, I got to sleeve my cards to search all over the United States of America and everywhere to find these. Go to Fantasy Flight, right? They have all kinds of sizes.
They want to keep the
cards.
money in GMT's pockets.
Right.
But yeah, the production value is very nice. All of the counters are pre-rounded.
Not all of them.
No?
Nope. All the units, the legions, the tribes, the fortified cities, I had to clip those.
My mistake.
Yeah. But now, most of them were pre-rounded.
The rounded ones, and
these are circles.
The hex ones as well.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought.
Yeah, I had to clip everything else.
Okay, but there's not a lot, is there?
There's maybe I want to say a total of 40 or 50 counters that I had to clip. Not many.
But yeah, it was nice games to play with. I like them. Nice to look at as well.
Well, let's talk about the cards really quickly.
Sure.
So that we already talked about what the cards are: the op points, the events.
Yeah.
One of the keys to the cards is understanding. What potentially you can get and how then to use those cards. So I really like that element because I felt like it was a little different than other CDGs, mainly because I didn't need to worry about the events being played. We already said that.
It's nice not having that burden from time to time.
But you made the comment, I had to kind of do a mathematical, very quickly, analysis as, oh, is this card more efficient to play for the op points?
Yes.
Or to use my event? And they always give the really cool events are always on your 3 op point cards. I love that about card-driven games. Not all of them do that, but most of them do that.
Yes.
So that's something you're going to find you're going to find that card angst where you're like, man, I need that event, but I need these 3 op points to put out 3 influence markers because, man, I can control the region and score victory points that way. So I found myself every round not worrying about how to mitigate the damage to me from your events, but how best to use those and what I needed to do to then put myself in a good position to maybe pounce at the end, because the Romans always get the last card play. Which is very cool. That's something I think they need. So I found that very interesting, trying to examine, okay, how am I going to use these cards?
It's funny, of all the games that we've played, this one I felt like, at least for me, some of the events weren't as good as having like 3 ops.
I agree, absolutely.
Yep. Whereas I think in other games it's like, ooh.
Yeah. And
I've really tried in this one, when we were playing, because I didn't have to worry about your cards. I'm like, I'm just going to play the action points.
Right, because that's what you're trying to do.
The action points. Yeah. It was some of the events, it was obvious, this isn't worth it.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know, it's always an interesting challenge. In some games you're like, oh, the event's clearly better. Yeah. Oh, the ops are much, much better. Here I'm like, I really tried to stay away from like, because it's, to me, the events are sometimes a little shiny distraction, like a magpie.
They can very well be.
Oh, look at this cool thing I could do. Yep. Oh, look at this rule that I can break.
But you don't really need to do it.
Yeah.
At that point.
My goal in this is to spread my influence and to prevent you from getting victory points.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that by having all of my influence out.
Yeah.
And keeping the pressure on you. And so it was, I don't know, it was just interesting. I like really tried to like have that as my mindset at the beginning of the game. This is what I'm going to really try and do. Try and not get distracted from my main goals.
Yeah. And I think that's a very solid way to go about it.
But I think in this game that it's worth having that frame of mind. Mm-hmm. It's quite easy. You're like, oh, I could move the little German migration unit.
Right.
And I could move it around here and like totally remove one of your things.
Yeah.
Or I could just spend an op and do something else.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I like that in this game, that some of those choices are a bit more open-ended and you're encouraged to play your action points instead of just doing event. Which that's a rabbit hole I go into in a lot of CDGs.
But the other thing I wanted to bring up, and I knew I had a point with this, I kind of lost it. The bonus cards were very cool.
Yes, I agree.
So there are a certain number of these cards that have the word bonus written at the top. And what that means is you can play the event.
Yes.
And then you also get to use the
op
points.
Those were very nice.
So, like, for instance, this one, Veni Vidi Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. You know, I can activate Caesar and a legate. So I can have 2 guys running around doing some sieges and some combat. But then, oh, look, I can use some action points. So I can...
3 ops. That's effectively a 5-op card.
Yes.
Which there's nothing like that in the game.
So you gotta be aware of those, and I really like those. I also found myself, from time to time, I was looking at yours, going, my gosh, I'm glad I have that one.
Yes, absolutely.
Because some of those bonus cards, I was like I'm sure when you had that one, you're like, oh, I'm glad I have that one away from Grant.
Yes.
There were some that I'm like, ooh, I'm glad Alexander didn't get his hand on that. And I thought that was cool.
And the other aspect of this are surprise cards.
Yes.
Which are like, you can use it to enhance an action or get a bonus for something, and it's usually worth 0 or 1 op.
Yeah.
So you might get that little thing, but you discard it out of turn, and then you draw a card to replace it.
So you can hold it.
Free little things.
Yeah, you can hold it kind of to the late game, hoping you're going to use it. Oh, I didn't use it, so I'm just going to discard it and draw a new card.
You might get a really good card.
You might get a 3 card, or a better bonus card. Some of those were, one of them was like a +2 modifier to an interception attempt or an avoidance attempt.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what the other ones were. There were only like 3 or 4 of those.
Well, yeah, I saw... I had one of them.
+1 DRM on the siege table, which would have been...
I think I used that one for a reroll in combat.
A reroll in combat. So those were just cool, but if you didn't need them, then you could just discard them and get a better card.
But it's nice
later.
that you discard it and replace it. I like that. Empire of the Sun does that as well with their little cheapo reaction cards.
So it kind of encouraged the use of those cards, maybe for what it was intended, or you could just hold on to it.
Yeah, or you can always just discard it and get a new one.
Yeah,
you can just ditch it if it never comes up.
So I thought they did a good job of the card system. I felt like it was kind of interesting and unique.
Yes,
a little bit, and I thought it really lent a lot of interesting aspect to the game.
Yes. What I'll do is I'll show you the board and how some of it works, and then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the board, and this was the one in which we had a concession during our first game. As you can see, it's point to point, so it's a lot of different circles, and there's a couple hexes and some squares, but everything's joined by these white lines, most of which are solid lines, so just one movement point to move from those. Some of these are dotted lines. It costs 2 movement point to move across those rough terrain or mountains. You can see there's a lot of these in the Pyrenees. And you can also go across, do a little channel crossing here. Costs 2 movement points as well. But that's what the map is. That's regulated by those points and lines. And if you can see behind those, the map's divided up into these provinces and regions. So you got blue, yellow, green, red. And within those are these small provinces, which are named, and they have a number on them. And the number is just what number they are on the map. So that just helps with placement. So for example, if I'm drawing my reinforcements, it's got that little white 4 on it. That goes in 4 province over here. Boop. So I can choose one of those places to put it in. What you have, though, is a little superscript, which is like a 3 or a 4. That's how many of the points within that province that you need to have your influence marker on to be considered in control of it. So for this one, you need to have 4 markers to control this region. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Romans control this region. If the Romans control, out of all of this yellow space, more than half the regions, they would be considered to dominate this area. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, they don't have no. But if you can get over half of the provinces in an area controlled, the Romans would dominate it, and that helps them because that gives them 5 governance points. If they can get 9 or 10 governance points, they score 2 victory points at the end of a round. So if they can dominate 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so if they can dominate this area and this area, or this and this and this, you can start getting lots of. That's how they're going to score victory points from controlling areas. Again, the Gallic player is just trying to stop them from doing that. The Gallic player doesn't score points, they're just trying to deny the Roman player points. After that, they can also the Romans can get points by killing Gallic tribes, so there's 3 points available there. And I was losing guys pretty quickly there, wasn't good. And then there's also a couple of other points from opening up Caesar's Pass, or invading Germania, or Britannia over here. You can pick up a couple of victory points from doing those things. Those are not easy to do. You have to come all the way up here and then make excursions out almost off the board, basically. So they're trying to accrue these points, and then the governance points, there's up to 2 available each round. Sometimes it's just 1 if you don't score enough, if you're only getting 7 or 8 governance points. So maybe you have 5 here, and because you have a presence here, you've got 2. That's so you just have a presence, I have like 1 in there. Then I've got enough points where I can score 1 point instead of 2, but you've got to get 12 from the whole turn, and it's really hard to accrue any in these first couple of turns. I'll be honest, very hard for the Romans to do that. But that's what the Romans are trying to do. Spread their influence, do a couple bits and pieces. That's how they're going to win the game. The Gallic player is trying to make that very difficult for them by counter-attacking or just stymieing their advances, forcing them into lots and lots and lots of combats which take up time and action points and resources. and then you send a guy like this in to come and move and start flipping these back over or removing them, just to wrest control away from this area. Oh, no, they don't dominate it. I got to send guys back to go and take that back. That's the kind of game that this is. And you do that through the play of cards. You'll have a hand of 8 cards, and the cards are, we can see, I do have small hands, but these cards are very big. They're quite tall, and they are gorgeous. The artwork on these is top-notch. Is exactly what I like in a card game. Just love the artwork on these. And these are sleeved. They do come with sleeves in the box, which is very nice, and that's the first from GMT, at least that I'm aware of. But you get a bunch of cards, and the cards have on them a value in the top left-hand corner. The value is from 0 to 3. The zeros are actually quite rare. Now, mostly 1s, 2s, and 3s, and you can see that they are aligned either grey, which is neutral, which is anyone can use it, blue, which is Gallic, so only the Gallic player can use the event, or red for Roman, only the Roman player can use the event. If I'm the Gallic player and I have this in my hand, I just ignore the event and I can use the 3-ops, no big deal. The event doesn't trigger for the opponent like it would in some other games. Same for the Roman player. If they have a Gallic card, they just ignore this, it's a 3-op card. Some cards here say bonus at the top right. Usually you do the text event, then you get to spend the action points as well. And so some of those are really, really nice. So you're going to watch out for those and try and capitalize on those, where you do a little extra action and you get some points. The other thing you might get, these 0 and 1 value cards, some of them say surprise on them. These are the ones that you can play out of turn or to enhance a card you're already playing. And you just do the thing and then you discard it and get another one. So there's no, this isn't one of your cards you play. It's not like a round. You just get it's like a free bonus little thing that you get added onto your action, which is very, very nice. As far as your actions go, there is a nice menu on the play aid card, but it's very, very simple, especially for the Roman player. You can move, you can place, you can convert, or, and when you're moving, you have things your army can do. It's real, real simple. The Gallic player can do a couple extra chromey bits as well, but generally speaking, I might spend an action point to activate this guy, and they can move. So they've got, and you look on here, you look at the little leader that he's with, the little legate, he's got a 3 movement value in the bottom right-hand corner, and he has, that little 4 gold value is how many troops he can bring with him without penalty. So he can move. And movement is simply 1, 2, 3. You just move 3 spaces. Again, if you're sat here, it costs 2 movement to cross this. 2, 3, right? So that's how that is. Real simple. Now, the other things that you can do is you can remove an enemy influence marker in a space where you are. So this is a very important part of this game. This is where your military units, a lot of their power rests, is that you could move 1 movement. I've used 1 of my 3, I've got 2 left. I can spend, like it said here, 2 movement points to remove this from the game. I let my march in, I sit there, I kind of quash their influence. I don't place one of my own, but I remove theirs. Then, on a subsequent turn, I might then be able to place my own one by spending an action point. Or, if I've got an action point left on that card, let's say I had played this card and ignored the event because I can't do any of those things. I've got 2 points. I spent 1 to activate. Boom, I activated him. He moved. So that's 1 of my action points done. Then I've got 1 action point left. I can simply place a marker out here. Great. That's what I've done. That's 2 action points used. I can call it good. Or, instead of doing that, I could activate a different general or a different legate, and he can move around and do something. Maybe do the same thing. Move up here, remove this guy. Or I might move some spaces, 1, 2, try to do a combat, or things like that. To siege a fortified town, you move in, and you have to spend 3 points to roll on the siege table, which is a lot. Effectively, this guy can't do it. He has to wait till his next activation, then he has to spend all his movement points sieging. The big exception to that is Caesar, who's got 5 movement points. He can move and then siege. He's very, very powerful, as you might well imagine. To siege an area, you've got a little siege table, and effectively you're going to have an odds ratio and then you roll on that column, and you need a certain number of siege points to be able to siege effectively. This needs 3, this needs 2. So you roll on here, the number on the left-hand side is how many losses you take, and the number on the right-hand side is how many siege points that you get. So you just roll 2d6, let's say we can roll them as the Romans, and I rolled a 9. And let's say we're on this table, you go down to the 9 column, I don't take any losses on the right, and I get 2 successful siege points. Great. So you get a little siege 2 marker. I actually wouldn't be on that table, because I'm much, much weaker than what's on here. But that's effectively how it is. You've got to get 3 to overcome that value. Very similar to something like Hannibal, Carthage, Rome versus Carthage. Very similar core system. But that's how you conduct sieges, which is how you remove fortified towns and these stronghold markers. And that's how you siege these walled cities as well. Combat, however, if you just do a straight field battle, let's say we got these 2, well, we'll just keep one. Just got this guy, and we'll bring up this army here. So here, you compare your combat values, but you don't make a ratio. You roll separately. So this guy's got 4, and this guy's also got 2 plus 2 is 4. His leader doesn't have a value. So with this, what you're going to do is the Gallic player is going to roll 2 dice, and I roll a 6, which is terrible. So I consult the 4 value table and go down to 6. I would do 1 hit to the opponent. And the Roman players got 4 strength as well. And they rolled a 1 and a 3. Normally, right? Normally that would be 4, which is a nothing. However, because there's just a Roman special ability, their 1s and 2s are always changed to a 3. So he actually has a 6 as well. So we both rolled a 6 in this instance. Now we get into the fun stuff. Here, this leader has this little 1 battle rating on it, which means that they can do a re-roll. And this guy also has that. So the attacker, let's say it was the Romans, they can say, you need to re-roll 1 of your die. And they can point to 1, and you re-roll this. And I re-rolled it into exactly the same number, as is my wont to do. So that re-roll didn't really work out. If I was feeling cocky, I could re-roll this, which I'm going to do it. Yeah! I re-rolled and got a 6. And so that's all the re-rolls. So now I've got a 10. So I'm looking at this, and I got on a 10. I'm going to do 2 hits, and they're only going to do 1 hit. So I'm going to do 2 hits to them. They're going to do 1 hit to me. Because I did more hits, they have to retreat because I won the combat. And that's fairly devastating for the Romans, because getting reinforcements is a very slow process. But that's combat. It's not complicated. You just have your combat value plus any leaders you might have, and they have a combat value, and you roll off, and then based on your combat strength versus your die roll, that's how many hits you do, and you compare the number of hits. Whoever does the most hits wins. So it's not a complex and convoluted system. It's fairly simple in that way. And what that does is it keeps the game from dragging down too much when you have to break for combat, because you might do 2 or 3 during a turn. Other things that you can do is you can avoid combat. If someone moves into your space, you can try to run away successfully on a 9 or more. No, so we got to do a combat. It's real simple. Or if I'm moving past somewhere, let's say, I'm moving past here. If I was sat here and I was moving into this space, he can try to roll to intercept me, and out of turn just kind of jump in and do an attack if he rolls successfully. So in that sense, you want to plan your paths the best you can, try and spread Roman forces apart so you can slip in the middle, get into these rear areas and start messing around here. That's the kind of things the Gallic players are wanting to do, whereas the Roman players trying to really march out and just quash everything and turn the whole board red. That's how they're going to win the game. So there's a couple bits and pieces more to it, but that's the core of this game. And what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map and somehow the game works. Like I said earlier, really like the production value. Really, really like the artwork on the cards.
Oh, yeah.
Playing with this game is enjoyable. I mean, I love the artwork on those cards. It's really, really nice. I don't know, I just appreciate a game with some high production value.
Yeah.
It just makes the game a more
that much more
interesting
enjoyable
experience.
and interesting, yeah. Yeah, and I know we talked a lot about, as we were playing, we tried to compare this to Hannibal, which was the first game in this series.
Yeah, it uses the same core system.
We're probably going to get crucified for this. This is more of a game than we believe Hannibal is, right?
I enjoyed this much more than playing Hannibal.
I would agree with that 100%. Hannibal, I felt like, was very one-sided, and if you didn't get the right cards at the right time, it was going to be very challenging and difficult to do what Hannibal needed to do.
It was, I felt like that game was very one-sided.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be because it's historical, but is that enjoyable?
Not
for us.
Yeah, and for these games, the reason we play the game is to have fun, but also to have an opportunity to
do well.
Well, to do well, not necessarily win. I don't care if we, but to be in the game.
Yeah,
and to really have a shot at doing what I'm supposed to do, and maybe win the game.
Yeah.
And I know I made the comment early on in our play, boy, it's going to be hard for the Romans to get their 12 victory points. Ultimately, yes. I only got like 4 or 5 because it was our first play. We needed to understand some things better. I would do things totally differently during our second play. But I also looked at that and I was like, yeah, this is pretty challenging.
Yes.
To get those 12 victory points, the Romans got to get in their saddle and they got to get running north. And they got to make some influence immediately. You can't mess around with it.
But there's a big difference between something being a good challenge and something being lopsided.
Well, impossible.
And this is a good challenge to me.
Yeah.
And if you put those two games in front of me, I would pick this one every time.
Yeah.
It's without question.
So don't hate us for that. It's just the way we feel. I'd play this game any day over the precursor to this.
I like that there's more balance in this.
Yeah.
It's more
uses
enjoyable.
The same system, uses the same concepts. This is just, I think, more of a game.
Well, there's nice things with drawing my tribes, then popping up randomly where they come from. Little bits and pieces like that instead of just, I recruit 2 guys in Rome, right?
Yeah.
This is a bit more, I don't know, it's more interesting to me as well. I like
this Gaelic council thing, we didn't fully understand every way that it works, but it's got some very interesting elements that I think through a couple of plays you're going to be like, I could use it this way.
Yeah, there's some nice little bits of chrome in this, like you got the Gaelic council, you can put guys and some influence in there, and then you can kind of just like influence bomb an area.
Yeah,
I guess is what you would use it for, but it's quite expensive to do that.
It is,
and is that expense
worth it? Yep.
Instead of just putting the stuff out, I'm not sure. So that's where some of the nuance to the strategies
to how to
of this
use
game
that
are going to reveal itself through playing this more and more.
Yeah.
The other aspects were, placing guys out. If I get my reinforcements in, I can place them on the board. But if you've dominated the board, there's no space for me to put them. They go into this little submitted tribes box.
Yeah.
And later on, I can release those guys if I've freed up their areas.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little revolt kind of thing.
But they're going to be reduced, right?
Yeah, so they're not
as effective. So that's something I think looking back on it, had I better understood that, I would have really made a push to get into some of those areas.
But it's also random when you pull
it's true.
It's
very true.
It's so difficult.
But the earlier the Romans get up there, the better chance they have to potentially stop those tribes from coming on the board. So that's another thing I think would have helped me quite a bit.
Yes.
So I liked those elements. One, there are a little bit of randomness. There's a little bit of gaminess to them.
Yeah.
But it made for an interesting experience.
Yes.
It wasn't just scripted or understood that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think things like those random pulls there, and it being a CDG means, whilst your goals are the same in this game from game to game, how that plays out will be quite different every time.
Oh yeah.
You know, I might have forces up here or down here, or kind of spread all out over, and it's going to change the focus of where you're doing what you're trying to do, even though your goals are the same in the end eventually.
Well, and the makeup of the deck, it's 55 cards, I think. We each get 8 cards per round. The way the cards come out, how they come out, what type of hand you have can really change the game.
Yes.
I had a couple really bad hands early on, and I kept waiting for you to kind of have a reciprocal bad hand. and it never. But the next game, it could be totally different. You could have the one that doesn't have all the good cards, and it may totally change the way that comes. So this one's going to be different every time.
Yes.
So I liked it. This felt more like a game than the other one.
Yeah, I enjoyed this, even standing on its own. If I'd never played Hannibal, this would be a good game anyway. But comparatively, I think it's a really good game.
Yeah, agree.
And it's not a 22 by 34. It's slightly smaller than that, which means it's probably a little bit easier to get it in a small space.
Yeah.
Some of those big wargame maps, and you get all the extra stuff and the play cards. It gets a lot. This is quite a small, little, tight experience, which is enjoyable.
And really, what you see on the board is really what there is.
Yep.
You know, it's the cards. There's a couple extra counters, but this is it. There's only, each side has 8 or 10 or 12 combat units, and the rest is influence markers and fortified towns.
They did a good job of holding boxes and stuff.
Yeah.
Keeping it on a map and keeping the map a decent size as well.
Yep.
Which is enjoyable. But yeah, point-to-point movement. So nothing massively complicated with hexes and all this other stuff. So, you know, you could teach this to pretty much anyone who wanted to sit down and learn it. It's not a massively complicated game. The cards are beautiful. It was almost never a time where I didn't understand what the cards or the rules were saying. Everything was typically very clear. There was, and I know that apparently there's errata out there, like with the starting legates. The game says there's 6, but I think there's actually 7.
Yeah.
So there's a couple bits and pieces out there, which I'm sure there's some living rules somewhere, but generally speaking, very easy to learn, easy to play, and to get through. And it's a topic that is both interesting, and I don't know a ton about, other than the most broadest sense and reading Asterix comics as a kid.
Right.
But
well, I've been watching Barbarians recently on Netflix, so I picked up a lot more of because that's really what this is, you know.
I want to watch that, because apparently the Gauls actually speak German.
They do.
It's a German show.
It is, yeah.
And so I'm hoping... Because
Don't get your hopes up. I don't think it's as good as everybody says it is.
No,
but it's
I
interesting.
speak German. So
Yeah,
I want to hear the German.
Right.
I love it. But yeah, it was a nice way to, like, even you taught me, we had a battle somewhere
Alicia.
that was historical. I had no idea. And you were like, this thing happened. And that's what actually happened in our game.
It's pretty interesting.
Things to have happened.
Yep.
Which is neat. It's a way to engage in some history that, you know, a lot of people probably don't engage
I've always
with.
been very drawn into Rome and Roman games, and we've played probably a dozen now, and I've enjoyed all of them. They're all very different and very interesting.
Yeah,
so,
this one's of those. This is quite an accessible one, I would say.
Yeah, agreed.
And
this is gonna
more balanced is good for newer players.
This is gonna translate well to all types of gamers.
Yes,
this is not just war game. It's not just. It's a hybrid. It really is in between, and it's going to bring some new people to the fold and teach them about these conflicts. And I've always also enjoyed point-to-point movement. There's times where I haven't enjoyed it, but it's always about understanding the most efficient routes. And
when didn't you enjoy it?
I'm trying to think what. I don't know that I have an example right off the top of my head.
I didn't know if there was the one where you're like, I hate that.
No, but sometimes point-to-point just is very deterministic, for lack of a better word. This one I felt like was really wide open. I could do whatever I wanted. So I enjoyed
agree with that statement.
I think point to point, when I only have 2 choices, that makes it really hard for me. Because it's not necessarily a game then, it's just I'm...
An example of that is Lincoln from Plastic Soldier.
Yeah, it's only really 2 ways you could go.
You've got all the fancy stuff in the Shenandoah, and then there's like 2 tracks in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And so that half of the game is... just fight down these 2 lines. It's quite dry. That part of it.
Well, another game that I absolutely love is Genesis from GMT.
That game was fun.
It's point to point.
Yes.
And depending on what culture you have, you really only have 1 or 2 paths.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I gotta go against them, or I'm gonna go over here. You know, that's what I don't like about point
I know what you mean by that.
I want a little more option, I guess.
This one though is I think there's a lot of option. Because, each thing's connected to 4 or 5 other things at least.
Right.
So, generally speaking, there's a lot of connections in a lot of places to go.
Yeah.
So, it works well in this.
And I do like the way they set this out with some of the movement rules and the different types of terrain you move across. For instance, these, what did they call them? They called them rough path. You know, when I have a legate that only has 3 movement points... I cannot move across that rough path and do a siege.
Yeah.
that was to me, very specifically put into the game to prevent that. And I thought that was good.
Yeah, so, where those are, it's both geographically historical, but also...
It just limits what you can do.
There's some elements of some game in there as well, which are nice. And then, that can be compounded by your leaders have a leadership rating, and that's how many guys they can control. Yep. Well, if you have more guys than that in a stack, movement costs even more as you're campaigning, and it's slower to move your baggage trains and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's really nice pieces of history are boiled down into a very small number on a counter, but it works well, and it's simple without getting overly complicated. So
agreed.
That's generally how I feel about this game, is that I enjoyed it, and I think a lot of other people can enjoy this, especially if they were new to wargaming.
I would agree with that.
It's both got some meat, but also not scary and overwhelming in any way.
Yep. I liked it. I had a good time.
Yes.
Even though I got destroyed, I had a good time.
So this is
fun.
Caesar, Rome versus Gaul from GMT Games. I would recommend this. This gets a thumbs up from me.
And I would also say you probably need to go ahead and try to get this, because I don't think this is going to be around very long.
Well,
they're gonna run out of copies, and then they'll reprint it. But that could take a year or two. So
I think this will be quite popular too.
I think if you want this, you're gonna have to drop the $70 or $75, whatever it is, and go ahead and get a copy. So Imperial Struggle is already on its second printing because they're out of copies.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this went a similar way, because it's
just a solid, good game.
And it's a nice topic as well.
And it's beautiful.
Romans. Yeah. And it's great production value. And
I want to play it immediately.
Yes, it's a good game.
Again, I want to play it again.
So
I want to play it again.
Appreciate you guys tuning in. Caesar, Rome versus Gaul from GMT. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.